In this class, we're going to talk about choice, and we're going to use an apparatus developed by economists called the production possibility frontier. It's a diagram. We're going to use it to get an insight into choice and the problems associated with choice. So let's get into it. First of all, what it shows. Well, let's say we have two goods here, and we like both of these goods, and we want the goods. But as usually the case in life, the more you have of one, the less you have of the other, because we have limited budgets, we have limited capacity. Sometimes we even have limited time to make the goods, even if we have the resources. There's always a limitation, so there is a trade-off between the two. This curve shows the maximum combinations of two goods an economy can produce with its existing resources and technology. So the curve is the maximum that we can produce in this very fictitious economy we've got here. This economy only produces two goods. Quite different from where we live. But imagine it. Imagine this economy. It only produces two goods, good X and good Y. And if it uses all its resources efficiently, the red line here, the frontier we call it, this frontier shows the maximum amount it can produce. It can produce anywhere in here, but that's inefficient because we can always get more. So if we're in here, we could get more, or we could get more this way, or anywhere in between. So it's the maximum amount that we can get. An economy can produce at points on or inside what we call the PPF, the production possibility frontier. That's important. The production possibility frontier. So it can produce on any point along the curve, because that's possible, production possibility frontier, and it's possible to produce anywhere inside it, but we can't produce outside. So out here, we can't get. We haven't got the resources to get out there. We haven't got enough land, labour, capital, entrepreneurship. We haven't got the factors of production to get out here. But we can produce along the curve. That's possible. And we can produce anywhere in here. If we're on the curve, by the way, we are efficient. That's the maximum we can get out of our resources. So we are being efficient. If we're in here, we are being inefficient. Out here is not attainable. We can't get there. So let's ponder this for a moment. Points inside the frontier are feasible. Points outside it are not feasible. We can't get them. So the curve is emphasizing that. We could also say that points inside here are inefficient. And they're inefficient because we could produce more. We could reorganize our factors of production, our way of working, and produce more. We could do that and get up to the frontier. So if we're operating somewhere in here, we can always try and get to the frontier, and that will give us more of X and more of Y, more of the two goods that this economy, this very strange little economy, produces. It only produces two goods, good X and good Y. But we could get more of them if we're inside. So let's take the point X to illustrate this. So let's say we're at X. Well, as you can see, we can move from X to the frontier. We could get more of good X. We can get more of good Y. Or we can get anywhere in here is preferable to this point here, to the point X. Anywhere in here is more efficient. And along the boundary, that's the most efficient. We can't get out here. It's not feasible. We can't get outside the boundary. This is our production possibility frontier. That's the most we can produce. Let's go back to the point A again and study the diagram a little more. If we're at A, That's possible. It's feasible. It's in the feasible region. We could move AC or we can move AB. That's feasible. That's possible. We have the resources because the frontier is out here. We can go to any point on the frontier. So if you go from A, we can go to B. Now, the nice thing about going AB is we're not giving up any of good Y. We're not reducing our amount of good Y. We still have the same amount of Y, but we have more of X. If you go AC, we have more of Y, but the same of X. X is the same here. So any point in between gives us more. Anywhere along this line AC gives us more Y. More Y is better than less Y. A is not as good as C. We get more at C. We're more productive. If the economy grew, if this little economy, this imagined economy of ours with just two goods in here, if it grew, then the curve, the frontier would shift outwards. So if all the workers became more efficient and there was new technological breakthrough with the capital and a more efficient way of working, then the frontier would expand. We'd get more. We can get more of X and more of Y, or more of any combination of them, than we could before. So the production possibility curve, PPC in this case, PPF sometimes we call it, production possibility frontier, but that shifts outwards, reflecting an increased capability to produce goods and services when, first of all, there are increases in the quantity or quality of resources. Resources, the inputs into production become better. Workers become more efficient. Output increases. Or there's a new technological breakthrough. The machines are able to produce more because they've been innovated. And that really overlaps with this point. There could be technological improvement, and the same way as the quantity of machines or the quantity of people or the quality have been improved. Really, the 2 points are very, very similar. Now, this curve is what we call concave to the origin. If you're looking up from the origin, it looks like a cave. We're going into the cave. Try to imagine the shape is like a cave. We're going in. So we call it concave to the origin. If we're looking from the outside down at it, if we're looking down at the curve, we call it convex. It's sloping away from us on either side. It's convex. This is concave. Try to imagine as a cave and you're looking in. So it's concave. So it's concave or bowed out, away from the origin. It's bowed away from the origin. It's this shape here. It's bent away from the origin. This is the origin down here. So you can see it's bent away. And the reason is because of increasing opportunity costs resulting from specialized resources. And these specialized resources, when we use them up to a maximum, and eventually as we reach the capacity limits, they become more and more costly. And in effect, what we've got is diminishing returns. The more you use something with a fixed amount of, let's say we use more labor with a fixed amount of land and capital and entrepreneurship. We use more labor, but eventually the return to labor will diminish. And we'll deal with this in our classes on production, where we'll talk much more about the concept of diminishing returns. But that's why it's got that shape, the law of diminishing returns. Now, this also introduces this concept of opportunity costs. Well, the opportunity cost is the cost of the next best alternative foregone. It's worth remembering that. This is very important. It's the cost of the next best alternative given up. If you become a chef or a cook, a great cook, but really you also wanted to be a piano player. Now, the fact that you're a great cook, the cost to you of being a great cook is not being a piano player, because that's what you had to give up. That was your next best alternative. And you had to give it up to become a cook, because you like cooking and you want to be a great cook. But it takes time. And that time means you can't practice the piano and your piano skills went down. So you had to give something up to get there. If you work as a solicitor in law, what some people call an attorney in law, if you work at that, perhaps you can't be an accountant. You can't be both. You have to give up one or the other. And we all have alternatives. These are our opportunity costs. If someone becomes an accountant, well, they can't become an engineer. We haven't got the time. Very few people can hold two expertise. So we have this idea of opportunity cost. If a company decides to produce a particular good and it dedicates its resources to producing that particular good, then it can't produce the other thing, the other one I was looking at. It has to give up one of them. It has to concentrate on what it's doing. If you decide to go to university and read for a degree in economics, which is a really good idea, if you do, then you can't do English literature, which is what you really wanted to do. So you have a choice to make. If you do economics, the cost of doing economics is not doing the degree in English. That's the one you had to give up. So opportunity cost is very important in economics. We keep talking about it, and it keeps getting mentioned. Here's an example. If the government is at the point A and wishes to get more of Y, in other words, it wants to move to B. If it's at the point A and it wants to move to B, it wants to get more of Y, then to get more of Y, it must give up some X. It gets more of Y. It goes from Y1 to Y2. That's what it wants. But to do that, it has to give up X. It has to move from X2 down to X1. It can't have more of both. This, sometimes people talk about this being the dismal science. Economics is the dismal science because it tells people what they can't have. And this is it. This is the problem. We want more of everything, but we can't have them. We don't have the resources. So we have to give up more X to get more Y. We have to give up X to get Y. So you can see how much we've got to give up on the diagram. And that's the tragedy, but that's unfortunately the way the world is. That's what we call opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the cost of the next best alternative foregone. The next best alternative given up. The next best, not any combination of something we've given up. It's the next best one. The next best. That's very important. The next best alternative foregone. If you're a very good singer, you love to sing, this is an example I gave you earlier, and you're also a very good cook and you love to cook. You can't do both. You don't have the time. What should you do? If you become a singer, you have to give up being a cook. You can't do both. You haven't got time. If you become a good cook, very famous cook, you will never become a famous singer because you haven't got the time to practice. There's an opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of being a cook is not having the time to sing. The opportunity cost of being a singer is not being a cook. You can't do both. You have to pick. And because you have to pick, and because these are what you really wanted, the one you give up is the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is the cost of the next best alternative given up. That is very important. If the government spends more on education, then it will have less to spend on healthcare. Often governments don't explain this very well to the population. So people are upset because the schools don't have enough teachers and the schools don't have enough classrooms, and that's very bad. But the only way they can get more classrooms and more teachers and more schools is perhaps by cutting the health budget or cutting one of the other budgets. But people don't want that cut either. And this is where politicians have to try to find a compromise, find some way forward, find a solution. It's very, very difficult. In economics, we'd say there isn't one. At the end of the proverbial day, at the end of the day, they still have to cut something. They still have to reduce something. If you want more health care, you've got to have less education, or you've got to have less police, or you've got to have less military, or you've got to have less roads, or something's got to be cut. You've got to find it somewhere. You can't magic it up. You can't wave a magic wand and make it appear. We call it a zero-sum situation, actually. We'll deal with this one under a separate heading in a different class. It's called game theory. But essentially what it comes down to is if we transfer from education to health, then we lose on education and we gain on health. And what we have to look at is, was it a good move? Sometimes zero sum means you have to take from one to give to the other. You can't give somebody something if you don't take it from somebody else. That's what the zero sum situation tells us. This is something in an area called game theory. As I said, we will look at it in a much later class. But for the moment, that's all we're going to deal with this one. This is the introduction to choice. So let's leave it there and say thank you for watching.